So the concept of retirement has actually evolved a lot in the last 50 years. We're all living longer, we're retiring earlier, and many of us don't have pensions like in the old days, and we're actually responsible for our own retirement income for a retirement that could last as long as 30 years. My guest is Ben Koval. He's with Soundpath Retirement in Bellevue, Washington. Ben, let's talk about longevity risk. How do you plan around for what could be 20 or 30 years in retirement?
That's a great question. That's the million-dollar question. The biggest fear that I see among retirees is outliving their money. And with longevity risk, people are living longer than their parents did. And so it makes for a more comprehensive planning process that's needed here. And so the way that you're able to negate what longevity risk is by having a well-thought-out plan. And this isn't about, let's take a percentage of assets and hope for the best as time goes on. A well-thought-out plan is being able to map out what income looks like every single year until age 100 or longer, depending on what your family history is. So really what it comes down to is being able to sit down, think about all the different elements that's going to happen over the next 20, 30 years plus, and then create a comprehensive plan around it.
So does this longer investment horizon justify taking on more risk in retirement planning when traditionally at this time the focus has really been on protecting assets?
Well, it's all going to depend per client, but more risk isn't the answer typically. It's going to be more around planning for volatility. You know, the market's all about volatility, and you want good volatility. That's when the market goes up, and you want to mitigate the downward volatility. I mean, the question comes is, should we be invested in Bitcoin if we need that income in the next 5 years? Well, no, it's too volatile, right? But do we need to have volatility for future years? Of course we do. So again, it comes down to the overall plan process and how long we need to plan for that longevity risk to be able to mitigate and to be able to fight against, being able to outlive what our parents did. And so again, it's more about volatility than it is about making more risk in the plan.
So two things in the news a lot lately, inflation and tax risk. How do you address those?
Yeah, inflation risk, it comes and goes, right? If you take a look at the past 15 years, inflation hasn't been very high. Arguably, it should have been higher. But if you look at the early 80s, inflation was huge. And so again, what this comes down to is proper planning through investments that are able to mitigate that inflation risk long term. You know, the time that inflation gets away from you isn't the next 5 years. It's 20 years out. And so you need to make sure your plan is able to weather that inflation storm. And taxation is a similar thing. Do we know what taxes are going to look like in 15, 20 years? No. Is it likely they're going to go up? Yeah, that's very likely. And so that's going to be a more specific planning. You know, you need to be able to take a look at what other buckets of taxable vehicles you have, IRAs to Roths to non-qualified, and be able to adequately plan that income from those different buckets throughout the years to mitigate and potentially help take advantage of the pendulum swings that happen to be our taxation code.
Finally, there's a lot of marketing we all see about hitting your retirement number. What's that number going to be? Is the better question, how much income are you going to need in retirement?
That's a fascinating question. I get that question probably more frequently than any others. And here's the short answer is, how do you know how much income you need in retirement? Have you ever been retired before? Most people haven't. And so when it comes to how much do you need and a targeted number, they typically go hand in hand. But the real answer here is going through the overall budgeting and the expectations that you have for your retirement. What do you want your money to do? What do you want it to be able to accomplish for you into retirement? And then being able to, again, adequately plan for that eventuality, making sure that we're taking into account future Medicare costs, future longevity risks. And so while it's nice to have when you're in your 20s and 30s a number to target, because that helps to further your saving, when it gets down to 5 years away from retirement, it's not so much about that number anymore, but it's about the reality of your income. And that's where, again, a comprehensive plan is going to be crucial, being able to take into account every year of your retirement and not just guesswork over the next handful of years.
That's Ben Koval in Bellevue, Washington. Thanks for watching Retirement News Online.